Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for American Farm Bureau's Mental Health Month virtual event, Farmers Saving Lives. My name is Jessica Cabrera, and I'm the Managing Director of Member Engagement at American Farm Bureau, and I serve as the staff lead of our Farm State of Mind campaign. As you may know, today is the last day of Mental Health Month, but these three Farm Bureau members are here today, hoping that their stories will inspire you to value mental health wellness among farmers and ranchers throughout the year. Today isn't the end of raising awareness, today is the beginning. So at this time, I would like to introduce our panelists to you. We have with us today James Dixon of Arkansas, Jeb Wilson of South Carolina, and Cynthia Christensen of Minnesota. So we're going to kick off by getting to know each of them a little bit better before we move into the rest of our conversation. So Jeb, I would love for you to start us off. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate everyone joining us here today. I'm a fifth generation farmer in Chester, South Carolina. I farm a variety of produce. We still grow peaches and watermelons, cantaloupes, strawberries. We still grow cotton as well. I'm a longtime member of Farm Bureau. I'm currently my county president. I serve on our state and national legislative committees. So I'm really committed to Farm Bureau. And I've also been married for about 15 years to my wife, Jane Wilson. And we have two little boys who are 12 and 6, and hope they'll be able to farm one day as well.
James, how about you? Oh, and you're muted, James. So if you come off mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, my name is James Dixon. My wife and I are contract growers for Georgia's Incorporated in Hinesville, Arkansas. It's a small town about 15 minutes east of Fayetteville. We have a 6-house boiler farm here, and before that, we're both originally from Magnolia, Arkansas. We had a 5-house farm there where we grew for Tyson for a little over 8 years. We served on the county board in Columbia County before our move, and also the state Young Farmers and Ranchers Farm Bureau board. And we're on the board here in Madison County now, and I also am on the state rural safety and mental health board.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And Cynthia.
Good afternoon. My dad's side of the family has been farming for about 150 years. And when I grew up on the farm in Iowa, I was really my dad's right-hand man when it came to fence building, gate building, cattle chasing, baling hay. But it became pretty clear to me that there was no expectation for me to farm as a girl. And I had a brother next to me. I'm the second of 13 children, and he is the farmer. And he and I were involved in a farming partnership for about 20 years in Southeast Minnesota. Currently, my farm is enrolled in CRP. And I became involved in Farm Bureau when I completed the Minnesota Ag and Rural Leadership Program and really felt like I wanted to give back to my ag community. So I joined Farm Bureau, and I've been privileged to be the president of the Houston County Farm Bureau for the past 13 years.
Wow. Well, one of the things that I think is so interesting about this group, before we even start to talk about your life experiences and your advocacy, is really just how engaged you are as volunteer leaders. And honestly, Farm Bureau as an organization is, it's membership. Our farmers and ranchers from across the country in one of the 2,800 county farm bureaus. I think this really is how we work together to serve as the voice of agriculture. So thank you for your volunteer leadership and your volunteer service. And thank you for what you do in the agricultural community. And specifically, obviously, we're here today to discuss a bit about the title of this event. So it's entitled Farmers Saving Lives. So I think it would be appropriate for us to discuss how talking about mental health might be able to save a life. Each of you have very different reasons why you care about this topic of mental health. And we all know that stories are powerful medicine. So we would love to hear from each of you about your stories, what has led you to become a mental health advocate. And so at this time, we're going to just spend some time digging in, learning about your story, who you are, why you're involved with mental health advocacy the way that you are, and then we'll take it from there. So, James, I think I'd love to start with you. Man, you have a very powerful testimony, and it does begin with a good bit of hardship. So, just recognizing that you have voice, that you want to share your story and are willing to tell your story. Would you be willing to share with those who are interested in this event right now a little bit about your journey? Maybe we can start out with what is your connection to farmer mental health, and how did that start for you?
Well, I guess it really started. I've told my story before, but in different settings, 12-step programs, things like that. But we won the Young Farmers and Ranchers Farm Bureau Achievement Award for the state in Arkansas last year in 2021. We're runners up in 2020. But Jennifer Craig and Steve Eddington came to the farm to help out with the application for the America Farm Bureau Young Farmers and Ranchers Award. And there was a question on there that asked me it was something along the lines of, what's the hardest thing you've ever done or been through? And I'd always on the application put something farm related, because I didn't feel that was the kind of thing you want to put on an application about me being a recovering alcoholic of 6.5 years, excuse me. But Steve and Jennifer encouraged me to put it on the application. And since then, I've got the opportunity to speak out and kind of tell my story in a few different ways.
Yeah, that's really amazing. I appreciate your courage to tell your story. So for those folks here today, do you mind starting at the beginning, telling us how your story, where that started and how that unfolded over time?
No, yeah, and I'll try not to be long-winded. So if I just ramble on, you might have to cut me off, because yeah.
We have time. It's okay.
I started drinking at a young age, high school, but throughout the high school, college, it kind of progressed to a point where by the time I purchased my first farm, the 5-house farm we owned in Magnolia, Arkansas, I was drinking every night when I bought my first farm at the age of 23, but I never thought it was a problem. It never interfered with my daily activities, whatever I had going on. So like I said, I never saw it as a problem. In my mind, everybody drank at night. That's what I thought, and at least what I told myself. And I never thought it was a problem until I guess the last 3 years before I got sober. It was really, I had a 5-house farm by myself on 40 acres. I was single. You don't have a boss. Yeah, you have the integrator that you have the contract with, but the service tech may come by once a week, if that, so it was kind of thing where things slowed down after. It was a lot of work at first when I first got the farm, but it kind of slowed down after I caught up on some things. And next thing I knew, it went from drinking at 7 o'clock to 6 o'clock to 5 o'clock to noon. And it slowly progressed to where eventually I was drinking 24/7. And next thing I knew, it's hard to put a timeline on it, but next thing I knew, it was either wake up and drink or wake up or vomit. Those were my two choices. My body was addicted to alcohol, and I didn't know. Well, at first I didn't want, for the longest I didn't want to stop. But I did eventually get to the point where I wanted to stop. I didn't know how to. So in the middle of the night, one night, I called my dad and told him I had a problem, that I needed help. And in the morning, I immediately regretted that. And because you do a lot of things that you don't mean when you're drunk. And I wanted help when I was drunk that night, but in the morning I wanted to drink again, and I didn't want anybody to interfere with that. And so that was the kind of mindset I was in for the longest. But it was too late. The people that had loved me, I'd already let them know, which they already had an idea. I just solidified that by coming out and saying it myself. But so for the longest, it was the kind of thing for the next couple of years where everybody was trying to do anything they could do to help me, get me help, make me want to help myself. And I didn't want to. I started doing things to purposely push my family away because I wanted to be left alone so I could drink. That was the most important thing to me. I mean, my family, the farm, everything else was alcohol, and everything else fell after that. And I mean, alcohol decided when I slept, when I didn't sleep, when I ate, if I ate, when I paid the bills, if I paid the bills. It had complete control over my life. And it it got bad there for, yeah, those last 2 years. It got bad. My own twin brother, he lived with me for part of the time before he moved to Tulsa, which this was years ago. But he eventually told me, one day he came up to me and he told me he was moving out, that he wasn't going to watch me kill myself. And I didn't respond well, and said some things that I'm not going to say on here. But and my own twin brother, who's my best friend aside from my wife, but we didn't talk for a year. My dad and I, he did everything he knew it. He did everything he could to help, and we got in a fist fight out in the yard one evening, which I hardly remember that, but it was things like that. That's how bad it got, until eventually finally decided to go get help for the first time. And but that first time I was going with the idea that I would go get everybody off my back, and I would not drink for 6 months, a year, and then I would go back to doing what I want. And anybody who has ever been there knows that that doesn't work. And of course, I think I lasted like 4 months, and it got even worse, and to the point where I did want to stop. And the second time I went back to treatment was the last time. That day I went into treatment, that second time was the last time I had a drink, and that was December 16th, 2015.
Well, thank you for sharing that story, and really that hard journey. I know that addiction can be so wild. It can, your stress and anxiety can lead to the addiction, and then the addiction can cause your stress and anxiety. Do you want to share anything about that, your experience of the alcohol's role in coping with your stress, and then the alcohol's role in perpetrating your stress?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said, I mean, at 23, I don't think, I mean, even adults, I guess, that's why people will get counselors and therapists to help deal with things like that. But I was 23 years old with $1 million farm. Looking back, I was not ready for that, obviously. And I was there by myself, and I didn't know, even that was just a little over a decade ago, and people didn't talk about going to therapy and things. It wasn't accepted like it was then, and you kind of felt like if you went to a therapist, it was a sign of weakness, I guess. And that's things have gotten a lot better. I don't feel like people think about it that way anymore, but yeah, the stress of the farm, I turned to alcohol and as a stress relief, and eventually, like I said earlier, it was, well, I'm stressed out and it's only 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll drink now, and it slowly turned into a 24/7 thing. And that's how I dealt with the stress of the farm, is drinking.
Wow. I'm curious now that you're kind of seeing the hindsight 2020 and you're looking back on your experience, what changes have you seen in your life since you got help?
I mean, it's complete 360. I remember the first 12-step meeting I went to, and hearing people say they had been sober 3 years, 13 years, 30 years. And it's crazy to me that today I can say I have 6.5 years, because I still remember that first year, or the first few times I went to meetings. I was sitting there thinking, this is insane. I can't go 3 hours without drinking unless I'm asleep. How am I going to go 3 years, 6 years? And but those 12-step programs, what I learned in treatment, I mean, it taught me how to deal with the triggers, things that made me want to drink. You learn tools necessary, like getting a sponsor, having someone to talk to, and you start doing all those things, doing the things that are suggested, that have proven to work. And it takes time. The first 2 years, it was tough, because you're working on gaining your family's trust back. I was $50,000 or so in credit card debt. I mean, just the financial side of it, I'm lucky I didn't lose the farm. I'm sure the integrator was catching on at some point. I mean, the grass around my chicken houses was taller than me. You would have had to bush hog it, things like that. But I mean, my life has never been the same. I was so mad that first meeting I went to, but I did not want to be there. But it's, looking back, it's the best thing I ever did, because I think 1.5 years after I met Ashton, I mean, it just, once I stopped drinking, I mean, things, they don't immediately get better, but it just step by step, things get better. You learn to be able to look people in the eyes again and forgive yourself, even though everybody else may have forgiven you. It takes time to forgive yourself for everything that you've done, and move on.
Wow, thank you. Such a powerful journey that you've been on, and so thankful for your recovery and also your advocacy, which we'll talk a little bit more about at the end here, just as far as why it's important to you to tell your story. But before we do that, let's go ahead and transition over to Jeb. And, Jeb, would love to hear a bit about you. And really, you have a completely different story of getting involved in mental health advocacy, and as does Cynthia. And so, hopefully those who are with us viewing this event will find some version of themselves in one of our panelists today, all kind of coming from a different angle, advocating for mental health in different ways. So, Jeb, tell us a little bit about your advocacy and your story of what drove you to advocate for farmer mental health wellness.
Sure. Thank you, Jessica, and thank you for that powerful story. I became very involved in the Farm Bureau Young Farmer Rancher program, starting in my early 20s. And a lot of times when we get together, it'd be the only time some farmers would have any, friends to get together, because like you say, James, that the farm can be so isolating. And when we got to talking, I would see that a lot of my fellow farmers had some serious concerns or issues, mental health issues. And a lot of times the mental health issues do come, they kind of manifest themselves through alcohol or through other problems. It just got me thinking about how here in rural South Carolina, we don't have a lot of resources when we need help. South Carolina is one of the fastest growing states in the country, but the last census showed that over 40 of our counties actually lost population. So folks are moving into urban settings, and some of our rural communities are dying. A lot of churches are no longer in existence. A lot of social clubs are no longer in existence here in the rural areas. So folks don't have as many resources as maybe they had even 10 years ago. And I had the opportunity to join a fellowship here in South Carolina. It's called the Liberty Fellowship. It's part of the Aspen Institute. And as part of the fellowship, they challenge you to come up with a project that would help folks in South Carolina. And through that, I came up with the idea to start this program called South Carolina Agri-Wellness. And, I always rely heavily on Farm Bureau to get ideas off the ground. I went to our State Farm Bureau, and several staff, including Jessica, were quick to jump on board and get this program off the ground. And we did it in a time when we started right before COVID hit. So COVID obviously made things more difficult, but we were able to do it through a employee assistance network. And that meant there were already counselors on staff that were able to quickly get up to speed on agricultural issues that impact farmers, able to start a hotline, also able to start a lot of training programs. Clemson Extension Agents, which Clemson is our land grant college here in South Carolina. They trained their extension agents, which we have extension agents in every county. Farm Bureau trained a lot of their field staff, and the program has been helpful. We've started a lot of conversations, and I think a lot of times just starting the conversation is half the battle. So that's a little bit about where we are right now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. It's really, that fellowship is a really interesting opportunity. And maybe you can tell folks here just kind of what that is, who you were, what type of people are typically in that fellowship. And then tell us why you've shared why you were interested in mental health, but I think it's just interesting as a grassroots leader that you went the distance to really stick with it, not just say, hey, we should do something, but to really see the results. So I would love to hear a little bit of, when you decided on mental health for that project, what did you think then? And then now that you've seen it unfold, what do you think now about advocating for mental health?
Sure. So the fellowship is a pretty neat opportunity in South Carolina. Some folks may have heard of the Aspen Institute, but the state of South Carolina is the only state that actually has their own self-contained fellowship. They work it through the Aspen Institute. I'm the only farmer who's ever been asked to do it. It's 20 folks every 3 or 4 years go through this program. And it was really a life-changing experience for me, because it's business leaders, it's mill owners, it's lawyers, there's a lot of politicians have been through the fellowship. So it gave me a lot of connections. As far as I know, I'm the only farmer who's been through it. We've had about 200 people go through it so far to date. Some people you might have heard, Senator Scott has been through it here from South Carolina. Mick Mulvaney's been through it, but it's a bipartisan fellowship. So you have folks from all walks of life. And I just got to thinking about something that I could actually make happen through this project, because they gave me some resources to get it going. And I just can't thank Farm Bureau enough for getting it going. But Farm Bureau came on board pretty quickly. Clemson came on board, and then the South Carolina Department of Agriculture wrote a grant, and we received a $500,000 grant to help fund this program going forward. And then the fellowship came back, and we received a $20,000 grant from the fellowship that's going directly to counseling services. So I guess what that taught me was if we stop and speak up, it's amazing how many resources are out there. It's a lot of folks who are wanting to help farmers right now. It's a lot of folks who are interested in helping the rural communities, a lot of government programs. And we just really need to step up and take advantage of these so that we can help our fellow farmers when they need the assistance.
Wow, great. Really interesting how that has how you've been able to just really influence that from without it being your full-time job, but just with your passion and your dedication to that. So thank you for telling us a little bit about that. Well, now I'd love to hear from Cynthia. And, Cynthia, you have such an interesting angle here. You are a licensed therapist, so I would love to hear about how you've gone from being a farm girl to a therapist, and really what it is that drives you to advocate specifically for mental health in the agricultural community.
Okay, I think those guys have really great stories as well, but mine does come from a different angle. So my advocacy really began when I was a psychiatric nurse at an acute care hospital. And when a farmer is admitted in that setting, typically it's because of a real significant threat for suicide. So it's a really serious business. But as a farm girl, I would be in patient rooms where the psychiatrist would be talking about the farmer, being under a lot of stress and needing to take a week off from work, or in October, suggesting that they were going to stay in the hospital for 7 to 10 days. And I could sense the farmer's thought process of, I've got combining to do. I can't sit in here for 7 or 10 days. And really it was going to make the situation worse. So I found myself beginning to kind of bridge the gap between the psychiatric treatment team and the farmer, and listening to what the farmer was saying about what they needed, and being able to communicate that to the treatment team so that they all were on the same page. Because it's really different for a farmer they're not going to take off a week from work. It's just not the same as somebody who's working in an office setting. And I would know if they were a livestock producer, they were going to be feeding the cattle as soon as they got out of the car from home. I mean, that was just the reality of it. So it was really helpful to be able to advocate in that setting for somebody the farmer was really out of their element. It's really intimidating. You're spending all your time inside when you're used to being outside and busy. So it really motivated me to actually get my master's degree and become a therapist. And I do have a private practice, but my dream was to sit at my kitchen table and do therapy for farmers across the state of Minnesota. And I do have my own practice, and I am certified in telehealth, but unfortunately there aren't enough farmers across the state who are interested in seeing a therapist. So I do have to see other people, but I'm hopeful that we're making changes to that. So anyway, so I find that just my role on the farm is very helpful in caring for farmers and farm families. So.
Right. Well, and I'm sure just in your volunteer leadership and whatnot as well, you interact with folks in your community and in Farm Bureau. I mean, you've been your Farm Bureau County president for a number of years, and I can only imagine that just in your relationships locally, even aside from professional, just to be a person that is a confidant and someone who is can be trusted by their community members, I'm sure is an asset to those around you as well. I know that my experience of knowing you and hearing from you, I'm always hearing something really meaningful. So I'm kind of curious from your perspective, Cynthia, you've heard from James and his very powerful personal testimony, as well as Jeb and what he's doing as a grassroots leader, just trying to make a difference, right? Trying to influence his community. What kind of insight do you have on the value of these things for the wellness of farmers and ranchers in our communities across the country, and folks doing things like what James and Jeb are doing?
I think it's just really invaluable for James to share his story, which is a very private story. but it's a story that needs to be told to give hope and encouragement to others who are struggling, that just didn't have the same resources, or, just a different story than James. So I think it's so important to talk about what we're all experiencing. Farming is stressful. When you think about chronic stress, I think about farmers. There's so much that you have no control over, and yet you need to somehow make a business out of that. So really trying to focus on what you have control over, and then just practicing letting go of the rest of it, and as a way of coping. So I think just telling stories is just incredibly powerful. And then I really respect what Jeb's doing. It's one thing to think of an idea, but it's a whole nother thing to take the idea and run. And I think we don't have enough resources in our rural communities that are available to farmers, that create an environment where a farmer feels like whoever's on the end of that phone line is going to understand what they're up to. So I think the stories being shared here today are really compelling, and hopefully foster other people to have the courage and dedication to do the same thing.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I fully agree, and I do. That's why we're here, right? Really, the truth is that telling our stories and letting it be known that we can be advocates for mental health in all sorts of different capacities, I think, and that can really influence other people's lives. It can save lives. And we, the community, are the greatest resource for farmer and rancher mental health. Everyone that is participating in this event, each of you are Farm Bureau members all across the country. They are the greatest resource, because the more we can learn to engage in discussion, to start a conversation, to listen and to support one another, to propel one another to get help when it's needed, I think we will make a difference, and there will be lives to be saved. So James, I would love to circle back around to you about really now that we've heard from Cynthia is a licensed therapist. I'm curious, what is, you mentioned that when you started your recovery process, it was the last thing you wanted to do. And now on the other side, what is your perception of therapy? What is your perception of reaching out and getting help as a farmer that is part of this culture of let's pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, right? What is your newfound perception on that?
Yeah, when I remember the first time I went to treatment, they might as well have been talking to a brick wall. I mean, I just didn't respond because I don't know. That's kind of hard to explain why I just didn't. I guess I have this mindset of I do everything else myself. I don't need them to help me fix this. And so, because I mean, you do everything else on the farm yourself. You make all the decisions, all the business decisions, a lot of the labor. And so I did not think that, and I don't even think if I was a farmer, if I wasn't a farmer, I would have probably had that mindset anyway. But the first time I went, it was every time I had a one-on-one session, like I said, they might as well have been talking to a brick wall. But that, like I said, that second time I went back, it had gotten so bad that I was willing to do whatever was necessary, and that was talking to them while I was there. And even also they suggested once I got out to see a therapist, and I did that too. I didn't enjoy it, but I did it. and today it's obviously was the right thing. Like I said, I still didn't enjoy it, but I still see a therapist now, just through BetterHelp. It's like $80 a week or something like that. I didn't for a long time. I did that first year of sobriety. And then, but after the move, I thought about it before we moved because we made a 6-hour move and bought a bigger farm. I'm doing everything myself other than when Ashton can help me. And I thought about it before we moved just because I know how if I get wrapped up in work, I can go back to my old way of thinking and things like that. So, but I never did. But actually, the last month I have been just because, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, and it helps to have someone to talk to get things off your chest. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with you mentally. It just, I mean, everybody needs something to talk to and someone to talk to. And sometimes it's better to have, you know, someone that is, what's the word? You know, other than that's unbiased, I guess, on what's going on with your life. You can just be honest.
Right. Thank you. Well, I think as we come upon our final 9 or 10 minutes here, I'd really like to see what kind of advice you have for those listening. There are, you know, you each have had different experiences. You have seen how your stories, your involvement, the path that you're on has influenced others. And so we would love to hear a little bit, you know, from you based from your vantage point. So Jeb, I'll start with you, and let's see. I'll put you up here. What advice would you give to a Farm Bureau member or a member of the agricultural community who really cares about this issue and wants to help?
I think my biggest suggestion is don't be afraid to start the conversation with your leaders. There's still some pushback with, you know, in groups that say, oh, we don't need this help. Farmers don't need this help. But I've seen it over and over now firsthand. I had the opportunity to do a session called Mental Health First Aid, and it's a national wide program. And myself and several Farm Bureau staff did it along with Clemson Extension. And at the end of that series of mental health first aid lessons, some of the extension agents stood up, and these were 70-year-old men, and they gave very emotional, tear-filled stories of how they lost their farms in the 1980s and had to go work for extension. And they just said what they wouldn't have given to have something in the 80s that could have helped them. So I think anything we do for each other is, you know, well worth the time and well worth the effort. And just getting the conversation started goes a long ways towards seeing actual results come about.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And since I was working at the state Farm Bureau before AFBF, I knew you at this juncture when you made this decision. And I just remember how powerful it is for a grassroots leader to come to the table, and you didn't just have that sideline conversation at the local event or at a local meeting. You took it, you know, you said, I want to convene a meeting of decision makers and stakeholders. And I think that to me was really powerful, because in this organization, when members speak up, that's when things get done. So if a member can, you know, chat on the sidelines, and that's not really going to influence a ton of change most likely, but if a member speaks up and really communicates that there's an issue that's very important to them, that they would like to see the organization work on, and building that coalition of other folks that care about the same things that you care about, I believe that becomes a very powerful vehicle for impacting change. So I saw that happen in your scenario, and I think we see it all over the country right now among farm bureaus and communities and grassroots leaders that are taking this topic and doing something with it in their own states and communities. So thank you for that.
I would say, Jessica, that, you know, I think we all know that Farm Bureau memberships are the best deal out there already, but this Agri-Wellness Hotline has turned into a great member service, and that was, you know, very smart of South Carolina Farm Bureau to turn it into a member service, because it goes beyond the hotline. If you need to find some help to do estate planning. They can connect you with estate planners. They can connect you with marriage. They can connect you with folks who can help your kids get into college. So, there's a lot in the mental health. So it's really neat that this hotline has just become a terrific member service for our folks in South Carolina.
Great. Thank you. So next up, James, let's see. I would love to know, what advice do you have for a farmer or rancher who is struggling?
I would say the first step would be reaching out to someone you trust or someone you can talk to. When I called my dad that night, that set off a chain of events that eventually saved my life. By all means, I shouldn't be here today. And had I not made that phone call, I probably wouldn't be, because then I had people fighting for me, wanting to help me and aware of the situation. But if you don't have anybody you're comfortable talking to, maybe your preacher or therapist, if you don't have anybody close to you that you want to talk with them about those kind of things, that would be my suggestion, is just find someone that you can talk to honestly without holding back or sugarcoating anything.
Very good. That's very meaningful coming from you and the experience that you had, and what you shared about the chain of events that happened after speaking honestly to your dad, I think is just a very powerful testimony. So thank you for sharing. Cynthia, I'm curious from your angle too, do you have any words of wisdom about how to cope with stress? Maybe how to prevent from getting to a really dark place? And then also, what would you say to encourage someone who has never been to a counselor before, that might be scared of taking that step that James was just talking about?
Yeah, I think I'll speak to that issue first. It is scary to call a counselor. And I think anybody who's thought about doing it comes up with a million excuses for not doing it. So I would even suggest calling it in the evening when they're not going to pick up the phone, and just leaving a message and then having them call you back, just as a way to kind of break down that barrier. But I would also encourage any farmer to reach out, because when you think about it, you hire a vet when your livestock's sick, or you hire a crop consultant, or you hire nutrient managers. You have a lot of resources that are available to you on the farm. And there is nothing more important than to your farm operation than you. So when you need some mental health resources, I would really encourage you to value yourself. I recognize that it is an expense, but you are worth it. So I would really encourage people to reach out and get themselves some help. In my therapy practice, I really like to teach coping strategies. And you can really fill up a toolbox with all kinds of just different ways of thinking about things that are very helpful, that are, pretty simple, but are powerful. But the thing that I'd really like to say is that, May is designated as Mental Health Month, but I would really like to see suicide awareness become in the same line of thinking as the Heimlich maneuver and CPR. They are all life-saving interventions. They are all done by people on the street. We all have a little bit of knowledge about how we recognize when someone's choking, or, Annie, are you okay kind of thing. And when it comes to the point of doing something about it, it is fear-provoking. To talk to somebody about suicide conjures up fear. I mean, it takes courage to have that conversation. But I think we, as members of rural communities, we've got to be able to step up and do it, because there's nobody else on the front lines but us. You can always, like with CPR, anything you intercede, then you call 911 and get the professionals. And it's the same kind of thing with suicide awareness. Learn the signs and symptoms of struggle, grass taller than yourself on the farm, James, is probably a signal that something's not going great. We watch each other, but really recognizing the signs of stress, and then really having the courage to ask the question. And if somebody says, no, I'm not thinking about ending my life, you've taught them that should they think about that, they can come to you. You're a safe person that they can reach out to for help. So that would be my final thoughts.
Thank you so much. Well, there's so much to be said about this topic. I know that each of you could sit here for another hour, half hour to discuss different thoughts related to this, but this has been a very helpful discussion. I'd like to say for those of you listening, I hope that you're inspired or motivated by what you've heard, and raising awareness and breaking down barriers can save lives. So you might be a volunteer leader like Jeb, who is now inspired to step up and help make a project possible in your community. Or maybe you're someone, you or someone that you love has struggled with addiction. And James's story has motivated you to seek help, or maybe to stick by your loved one, or even to tell your own story of victory in order to propel change across the people that you meet. And maybe the idea of talking to a counselor has always been terrifying for you. And now, after hearing from Cynthia and realizing she's not so scary, you could be encouraged to seek professional counseling and to know that there are farmers and ranchers and farm families out there that are in counseling services. So regardless of your reason for attending this event, our hope is that hearing these stories will help save lives. And I'd like to say that for more information about our work here at American Farm Bureau, you can visit farmstateofmind.org. You can also find an email address to contact us at farmstateofmind@fb.org, and it's on the bottom of that page as well. We will have a recording of this event up after the event. If you feel like someone that you know might like to view this event at a later time. And honestly, one of the things that is so critically important to us is that folks who work with farmers are trained up to be able to start this conversation like what you've heard today. So please consider further education in this area. If this is something that you interact with farmers on a regular basis, please get trained up to feel comfortable in your own skin having difficult conversations at times. You don't have to be a mental health professional, but recognizing the warning signs and feeling comfortable to start a conversation can go a really, really long way. In James's example, his father wasn't a mental health professional. His father was just caring for him. And I think that with that being said, on our site, we do have a rural resilience training. Also this month, really throughout the summer, I believe they're already posted. A group that we partner with heavily, AgriSafe Network, is currently offering free QPR training for farmers and farm families. And even if you're not a farmer or a farm family member, but if you are in the agricultural community and you want to get trained up on this, I highly recommend that you check that out as well. There are many, many resources. And so in closing, I'll just point you towards some of those. We have a national directory at farmstateofmind.org, and that directory can give you access to search for your state, as well as nationally, the resources that are available in your area. And I saw in the chat somebody had asked that question. So please visit farmstateofmind.org, look at the national directory, and you can search for your local area and resources that are available. If you're aware of a resource that is not on our directory, please email us at farmstateofmind@fb.org and recommend those resources to us to be added to the directory. Thank you so much to everyone who has attended today. I will remain on the line momentarily to review the chat, just see if there's anyone that we need to respond to. But thank you so much for being with us.